The soft hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound in our bedroom as I drifted off to sleep, blissfully unaware of the quiet deceit unfolding beside me. My husband, Daniel, moved with practiced stealth, his fingers gently sliding my purse from the nightstand. I stirred slightly, but didn't wake, lulled by the false security of our shared life. As I slept, Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, but he reassured himself this was necessary, he thought. He retrieved my credit card with trembling fingers, careful not to make a sound. He paused for a moment, looking at my sleeping form, a flicker of guilt crossing his face before he pushed it away. Without a backward glance, he exited our bedroom, leaving behind the warmth of our marital bed and the trust one had placed in him. The next morning, I woke to the cheerful chirping of birds outside our window. Stretching lazily, I reached for my phone on the nightstand, noticing absently that my purse wasn't where I'd left it. A single notification made me pause, an alert from the bank confirming a hefty transaction. Confusion melted into a sickening realization as I noted the purchase details, a high-end jewelry store, late last night. My pulse quickened as I turned to Daniel, who was already awake, watching me with an unreadable expression. I barely had time to form the question before he spoke, his voice laced with a hostility I'd never heard before. If you're not satisfied with my choices, you can sign the divorce papers. But don't question me again. His words were knives, cutting deep as he dismissed my outrage with an air of indifference. I felt my breath hitch, my pulse roaring in my ears, but to my own surprise, I didn't react with anger or desperation. Instead, an eerie calm settled over me. I gazed at him, my once loving husband now exposed as a man who valued his mother's approval over his wife's trust. Slowly, I nodded and murmured, "Okay." Daniel scoffed, mistaking my composed demeanor for submission. He grabbed his briefcase and walked toward the door, not bothering to offer a second glance. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sat motionless for a long moment, my mind racing. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush my spirit. But something inside me refused to break. If that was how he valued our marriage, then he would soon understand what loss truly meant. I got out of bed, my movements mechanical as I went through my morning routine. The house felt different now, as if the very walls were whispering of Daniel's deceit. I made coffee, the familiar aroma doing little to comfort me as I tried to process what had just happened. As I sipped the bitter liquid, I thought back to the early days of our relationship. Daniel had been charming, attentive, always ready with a kind word or a thoughtful gesture. But there had been signs, hadn't there? The way he deferred to his mother's opinion, the subtle put-downs when I disagreed with her, the growing distance between us as the years went by. I'd ignored it all, chalking it up to normal family dynamics, telling myself that love would conquer all. How naive I'd been. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Lisa. "Lunch today," it read. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keypad. Should I tell her what had happened? The thought of explaining Daniel's betrayal made my stomach churn. No, not yet. I needed time to think, to plan. "Can't today," I typed back. "Busy with work." Rain check. Lisa's reply came quickly. "Sure thing. Don't work too hard." If only she knew. I spent the morning in a daze, going through the motions of my work-from-home job. Emails blurred before my eyes, conference calls became a distant buzz in my ears. All I could think about was the diamond ring Daniel had bought, not for me, but for his mother. The woman who had never accepted me as part of the family, who had always viewed me as an interloper stealing her precious son away. Around noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out of the house, away from the suffocating memories of a marriage I now realized had been built on shifting sands. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, not bothering to leave a note. Why should I, when Daniel hadn't extended me the same courtesy? The streets of our small town were busy with lunchtime traffic. I drove aimlessly, not really seeing the familiar storefronts and faces. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for clues I might have missed. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of Rose's Diner, a local institution where Daniel and I had shared countless meals over the years. The cheerful neon sign seemed to mock me now, a relic of happier times. Inside, the waitress, Donna, her name tag proclaimed, greeted me with a smile. "Just you today, hun? Where's that handsome husband of yours?" I forced a smile. "Working late," I lied smoothly. "I'll just have a coffee, please." As I waited for my order, I overheard snippets of conversation from nearby tables. A young couple arguing over wedding plans, an elderly man regaling his grandchildren with stories of his youth, a group of friends laughing over shared jokes. Normal, everyday life continuing all around me while my world crumbled. Donna returned with my coffee. "You sure I can't get you anything else, sweetie? You're looking a bit peaky." I shook my head. "I'm fine, thanks. Just a bit tired." She nodded sympathetically. "I hear ya. My Frank works nights at the factory. Sometimes I feel like ships passing in the night, you know?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If only my problems were as simple as conflicting schedules. As I sipped my coffee, my eyes fell on a help-wanted sign in the diner's window. A spark of an idea began to form in my mind. If I was going to leave, and I knew now that I had to, I would need money of my own. Our joint accounts wouldn't be safe once Daniel realized what I was planning. I caught Donna's eye. "That job still available?" She looked surprised. "Sure is. You know someone looking?" I took a deep breath. "Yeah. Me." Donna's eyebrows shot up. "You?" But I thought. I mean, doesn't Daniel make good money at that fancy firm of his? I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Just looking for something to keep me busy, you know? Maybe put a little extra aside for a rainy day." She studied me for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that she saw right through my facade. But all she said was, "Well, if you're serious, I can get you an application. Rose is always looking for good help." I nodded gratefully. "That would be great, thanks." As Donna went to fetch the application, I felt a small thrill of excitement cutting through my despair. This was the first step towards independence, towards a life free from Daniel's control and his mother's influence. I filled out the application right there at the counter, my handwriting shaky but determined. When I handed it back to Donna, she gave me a long look. "You sure about this, honey? It's not exactly glamorous work." I met her gaze steadily. "I'm sure. When can I start?" She chuckled. "Well, aren't you eager? Tell you what, come by tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. We'll give you a trial run, see how you do." I left the diner feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As I drove home, I began to formulate a plan. I would work at the diner, save every penny I could. I'd start looking for a small apartment, something I could afford on my own. And when the time was right, I would leave Daniel with the same swiftness and finality with which he had betrayed me. Back at the house, I moved through the rooms with new purpose. I began to take stock of our possessions, mentally categorizing what was mine, what was his, and what we had acquired together. The task was both liberating and heartbreaking. Each shared item was a reminder of the life we had built, the future we had planned, now nothing more than a hollow shell. As evening approached, I heard Daniel's car pull into the driveway. For a moment, panic gripped me. What if he could tell what I was planning? But then I remembered his dismissive attitude that morning, his certainty that I would simply accept his betrayal without question. I squared my shoulders and went to greet him, the perfect picture of a dutiful wife. "How was your day, dear?" I asked, my voice sickly sweet. He grunted non-committally, barely looking at me as he loosened his tie. "Fine. What's for dinner?" And just like that, we fell into our usual routine. Me, preparing a meal he barely tasted. Him, talking about his day at the office, never once asking about mine. As I watched him across the dinner table, I marveled at how blind I'd been. This man, this stranger in my home, had never truly seen me, never truly valued me. But that was about to change. As I cleared the dishes, a sense of calm determination settled over me. The betrayal still stung, but it no longer had the power to destroy me. Instead, it had awakened something in me, a strength I didn't know I possessed. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life. A life without Daniel, without his controlling mother, without the constant feeling of being second best. It wouldn't be easy, but as I lay in bed that night, listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me, I knew it would be worth it. The soft hum of the ceiling fan lulled me to sleep, but this time, I was the one with secrets. And unlike Daniel, my secrets would set me free. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel, my mind already racing with plans. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to disturb him. As I made my way to the kitchen to start the coffee, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different somehow, more determined, less willing to compromise. I was pouring my first cup when Daniel stumbled into the kitchen, his hair mussed from sleep. He grunted a greeting and reached for the coffee pot. I watched him silently, wondering how this man I once loved had become such a stranger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Daniel looked up, his eyes narrowing. "About what?" I took a deep breath. "About the credit card charge. About the ring you bought for your mother." His face hardened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something, guilt, anger, cross his features. But then his expression settled into a mask of indifference. "I told you yesterday, Elena. If you're not satisfied with my choices, you can sign the divorce papers. But don't question me again." His words were knives, cutting deep as he dismissed my concerns with an air of finality. I felt my breath hitch, my pulse roaring in my ears, but to my own surprise, I didn't react with anger or desperation. Instead, an eerie calm settled over me. "Is that really what you want, Daniel? To end our marriage over this?" He scoffed, mistaking my composed demeanor for weakness. "Don't be dramatic, Elena. I'm just saying that as my wife, you should trust my decisions." I almost laughed at the absurdity of his statement. Trust? After what he'd done? "Trust works both ways, Daniel," I said quietly. "You betrayed mine when you took my credit card without asking." He slammed his coffee mug down on the counter, splashing hot liquid across the pristine surface. "For God's sake, Elena, it's not like I bought it for another woman. It's for my mother." "Your mother," I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "The same mother who's never accepted me as part of this family. The same mother who criticizes everything I do, everything I am." Daniel's face flushed with anger. "Don't talk about her like that. You don't understand our relationship." "You're right," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I don't understand a relationship that makes you betray your wife's trust." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Look, I didn't want to do it this way. But Mom's birthday is coming up, and I wanted to get her something special. I knew you'd overreact if I told you." "Overreact?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Daniel, you stole my credit card. You made a major purchase without consulting me. How is that overreacting?" He waved a dismissive hand. "It's our money, Elena. What's the big deal?" I stared at him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. This man, who I'd loved and supported for years, who I'd thought was my partner in everything, couldn't even understand why his actions were wrong. "The big deal," I said slowly, "is that you didn't respect me enough to have a conversation about it. You didn't trust me to understand or support your decision. Instead, you went behind my back." Daniel's expression softened slightly, and for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I'd fallen in love with. "Elena, I'm sorry if I hurt you. That wasn't my intention. But you have to understand, my mother-your mother," I interrupted, feeling a surge of courage, "is not your wife. I am. Or at least, I thought I was." He flinched at that, and I pressed on, the words pouring out of me like a dam had broken. "For years, Daniel, I've tried to be the perfect wife. I've bent over backwards to please your mother, to fit into your family. I've swallowed my pride, ignored the snide comments, the constant criticism. And for what? To have my husband sneak around behind my back." Daniel's face hardened again. "You're blowing this out of proportion. It's just a ring." "It's not about the ring," I exploded, my calm finally shattering. "It's about respect, Daniel. It's about partnership. It's about you choosing your mother over me, time and time again." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the kitchen floor. "I'm not going to stand here and listen to you insult my family." I laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to echo in the tense silence of our kitchen. Your family? What about our family, Daniel? What about the life we've built together? He grabbed his briefcase, his movements jerky with anger. I'm going to work. When I get back, I expect you to have calmed down and seen reason. As he stormed towards the door, a sudden clarity washed over me. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of my life. I could let him walk out that door, pretend everything was fine, and continue living this half-life of compromise and resentment. Or I could take a stand. Daniel, I called out, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. He paused at the door, his back to me. If you walk out that door without resolving this, don't expect me to be here when you get back. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting mine. For a long moment, we stared at each other, the weight of years of unspoken grievances hanging between us. Then, without a word, he opened the door and left. The click of the latch echoed in the sudden silence of our home. I stood there, rooted to the spot, listening to the sound of his car starting, then fading as he drove away. Only when I could no longer hear the engine did I allow myself to move. My legs felt weak as I made my way to the living room, collapsing onto the couch. The magnitude of what had just happened washed over me in waves. I had given Daniel an ultimatum, and he had made his choice. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. What had I done? Where would I go? How would I survive without Daniel, without the life we'd built together? But as quickly as the panic came, it receded, replaced by a steely resolve. I thought about the job application I'd filled out at Rose's Diner the day before. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I thought about Lisa, my best friend, who had been telling me for years that I deserved better than the way Daniel and his family treated me. I stood up, my decision made. I wouldn't wait for Daniel to come home, wouldn't give him the chance to smooth things over with empty promises and half-hearted apologies. It was time to take control of my own life. With a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, I headed to our bedroom. I pulled out a suitcase from the back of the closet, the same one we'd used on our honeymoon all those years ago. As I began to fill it with clothes and essentials, memories flooded my mind. Our first date, when Daniel had been so nervous he'd spilled wine all over himself. The day he proposed, down on one knee in the park where we'd first met. Our wedding day, full of hope and promises for the future. But those memories were tainted now, overshadowed by years of subtle put-downs, of always coming second to his mother's wishes, of feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. As I zipped up the suitcase, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the dresser. I picked it up, tracing the smile on my younger self's face. How innocent I'd been, how full of hope for the future. I placed the photo face down and turned away. I moved through the house, gathering important documents, my birth certificate, passport, bank statements. As I worked, I called Lisa. "Hey, Elle," she answered cheerfully. "What's up?" "Lisa," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I need a favor." There must have been something in my tone because her voice immediately turned serious. "Anything, honey. What's wrong? Can I stay with you for a while?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Daniel and we're done." There was a moment of silence, then Lisa's voice came back, firm and supportive. "Of course you can. Do you need me to come get you?" I looked around at the half-empty closet, the packed suitcase. "No, I can drive. I'll explain everything when I get there." "Okay, hun, I'll be waiting." "And Elena, I'm proud of you." Those simple words nearly undid me. I thanked her quickly and hung up before I could break down. With one last look around the bedroom where I'd spent so many nights dreaming of a better future, I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. In the kitchen, I paused, struck by a sudden impulse. I found a piece of paper and a pen, and quickly scrawled a note. "Daniel, you made your choice. Now I've made mine. Enjoy your mother's ring. It's the only thing left of your choices. Elena." I left the note on the kitchen counter, where I knew he'd see it. Then, with a deep breath, I walked out of the house that had been my home for the last 5 years. As I loaded my suitcase into the car, I saw Mrs. Peterson from next door watering her roses. She waved cheerfully, and I waved back, wondering what she'd think when she realized I wasn't coming back. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I allowed myself one last look at the house. It looked the same as it always had: neat lawn, trimmed hedges, Daniel's prized rosebushes blooming in the front garden. But it wasn't home anymore. Home, I realized, was somewhere I had yet to find, somewhere I could be truly myself, without compromise. With that thought, I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. As I drove towards Lisa's house and an uncertain future, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was making a decision for myself, not for Daniel, not for his mother, but for me. The road ahead was unclear, full of challenges I couldn't even imagine yet. But as I merged onto the highway, leaving behind the familiar streets of the neighborhood I'd called home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. And that, I realized, was worth more than any diamond ring. The drive to Lisa's house was a blur. My mind raced with thoughts of what I'd just done, what I was about to do, and all the uncertainties that lay ahead. The familiar streets of our small town seemed different somehow, as if they were already becoming memories rather than the backdrop of my daily life. As I pulled into Lisa's driveway, I saw her waiting on the porch. The moment she caught sight of me, she rushed down the steps, her face a mixture of concern and relief. I barely had time to turn off the engine before she was opening my car door, enveloping me in a warm hug. "Oh, honey," she murmured, holding me tight. "I'm so sorry." Those simple words of comfort broke something inside me. All the emotions I'd been holding back, the anger, the hurt, the fear, came rushing out in a flood of tears. Lisa just held me, rubbing soothing circles on my back as I sobbed into her shoulder. After what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I'm sorry," I sniffled. "I got your shirt all wet." Lisa gave a watery chuckle. "Don't you dare apologize. That's what friends are for." She squeezed my hand. "Come on, let's get you inside. I've got a pot of coffee brewing, and you can tell me everything." As we sat at Lisa's kitchen table, steaming mugs of coffee in front of us, I poured out the whole story. Daniel's betrayal with the credit card, his mother's constant interference, the years of feeling like I was never quite good enough. Lisa listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly thunderous as I spoke. When I finally finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Elena, I'm so proud of you for leaving. You deserve so much better than that." I gave her a weak smile. "I know. I can't believe it's really over. 10 years of my life, Lisa. What am I supposed to do now?" Lisa's eyes sparkled with a determination that I envied. Now you live your life on your own terms. No more compromising who you are to please Daniel or his witch of a mother." I couldn't help but laugh at her description of my mother-in-law. Ex-mother-in-law, I corrected myself, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "That's right," Lisa nodded approvingly. "And good riddance to her. Now, let's talk practicalities. You can stay here as long as you need, no arguments." I started to protest, but she held up a hand to stop me. "I mean it, Elena. Mi casa es su casa. We'll set you up in the spare room, and you can take all the time you need to figure out your next steps." Gratitude washed over me. "Thank you, Lisa. I don't know what I'd do without you." She grinned. "Lucky for you, you'll never have to find out. Now, how about we get you settled in?" The next few hours passed in a flurry of activity. Lisa helped me unpack my hastily packed suitcase, making room for my clothes in her spare room closet. As we worked, she kept up a steady stream of chatter, filling me in on the latest town gossip and making me laugh with her outrageous impressions of our high school teachers. It wasn't until later that evening, as we sat on her couch with takeout Chinese food, that reality began to sink in again. "I can't believe I just walked out," I murmured, pushing a piece of chicken around my plate. "What if I've made a huge mistake?" Lisa set down her chopsticks and turned to face me. "Elena, listen to me. You did not make a mistake. You stood up for yourself. That's something to be proud of, not doubt." I nodded, trying to believe her words. "I know, it's scary. I've been with Daniel for so long. I don't know who I am without him. Well, I do, Lisa said firmly. You're Elena Martinez. You're smart, you're kind, and you're strong as hell. And now you get to rediscover all the parts of yourself that got lost in trying to be Daniel's perfect wife. Her words struck a chord in me. How much of myself had I compromised over the years? How many of my own dreams and desires had I pushed aside to accommodate Daniel's wishes, or worse, his mother's? As if reading my thoughts, Lisa continued, remember when we were in college, and you wanted to start that small bakery? Whatever happened to that dream? I felt a pang in my chest at the memory. Daniel said it wasn't practical. That I should focus on getting a real job instead. Lisa's eyes flashed with anger. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. The Elena I know wouldn't have given up on her dreams so easily. It's time to get that Elena back. Her words ignited a spark of something in me, determination, maybe, or hope. You're right, I said slowly. I've spent so long trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be. Maybe this is my chance to figure out who I really am. Lisa beamed at me. Now that's what I like to hear. And hey, who knows? Maybe that bakery dream isn't dead after all. For the first time since I'd left my house that morning, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Maybe it's not, I agreed. We spent the rest of the evening planning and dreaming. Lisa helped me make a list of all the things I'd always wanted to do but had put off for one reason or another. By the time we went to bed, my head was spinning with possibilities. As I lay in the unfamiliar bed in Lisa's spare room, staring at the ceiling, I found myself thinking about Daniel. What was he doing right now? Had he come home to find my note? Was he worried, angry, relieved? I pushed the thoughts away. It didn't matter what Daniel was thinking or feeling. For once, I needed to focus on myself. The next morning, I woke early, my body still on its usual schedule despite the upheaval of the past day. For a moment, as I blinked in the unfamiliar room, panic threatened to overwhelm me. What had I done? But then I remembered Lisa's words from the night before, and I felt my resolve strengthen. I got out of bed and padded to the kitchen, intent on making coffee. To my surprise, Lisa was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She looked up as I entered, a mischievous grin on her face. Morning, sleeping beauty. I've got a surprise for you. I raised an eyebrow as I poured myself a cup of coffee. Oh. Should I be worried? She laughed. Not at all. I've been doing some research. Did you know there's a small business seminar happening at the community college next week? They're covering everything from writing a business plan to securing funding. I nearly choked on my coffee. Lisa, are you serious? She nodded, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Completely. I thought it might be a good first step if you're serious about revisiting that bakery dream. I felt a flutter of excitement in my chest. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Lisa waved off my thanks. Don't thank me yet. You're the one who's going to have to do all the hard work. But I believe in you, Elena. And I think it's about time you started believing in yourself too. As I sat there, sipping my coffee and looking at the seminar details on Lisa's laptop, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time, hope for the future. For the first time in years, I was excited about what lay ahead, rather than dreading it. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Lisa insisted on taking me shopping, claiming I needed a new start wardrobe. As we browsed through racks of clothes, I found myself gravitating towards styles I would never have considered before, bold colors and patterns that Daniel would have disapproved of. Now that's more like it, Lisa said approvingly as I emerged from the dressing room in a vibrant blue dress. The old Elena would never have dared wear something so eye-catching. I smoothed my hands over the soft fabric, admiring my reflection in the mirror. You're right, I admitted. But you know what? I kind of like it. Lisa grinned. Good. Because you're getting it. My treat. I started to protest, but she held up a hand to stop me. Consider it an investment in the new Elena. The Elena who's going to take the world by storm with her amazing cupcakes. I couldn't help but laugh at her enthusiasm. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I haven't even been to the seminar yet. Details, Lisa said, waving a dismissive hand. I have faith in you. As we left the store, bags in hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges I couldn't even imagine yet. But for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to facing those challenges. That night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking about the note I'd left for Daniel. "You made your choice. Now I've made mine." Those words felt more true now than ever before. Daniel had chosen his mother, his comfort, his status quo. And I had chosen myself. It wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be days when I'd doubt my decision, when the fear of the unknown would threaten to overwhelm me. But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. And that, I realized, was worth more than any diamond ring or comfortable but stifling marriage. For the first time in years, I was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. As the days turned into weeks, I slowly settled into a new routine at Lisa's house. Every morning, I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit on her back porch, watching the sun rise over the neighbor's fence. It was in these quiet moments that I felt both the weight of my decision and the liberating lightness of possibility. Lisa, true to her word, had been an unwavering pillar of support. She'd not only given me a place to stay but had also been instrumental in helping me navigate the choppy waters of my new life. With her encouragement, I'd attended the small business seminar at the community college, my mind buzzing with ideas and possibilities for my long-forgotten bakery dream. It was on a particularly sunny Tuesday morning, about 3 weeks after I'd left, that Lisa broached a subject we'd both been avoiding. "Elena," she said, her tone cautious as she joined me on the porch with her own mug of coffee, "have you thought about going back to the house to get the rest of your things?" I felt a knot form in my stomach. In truth, I'd been putting it off, dreading the thought of facing the physical remnants of my life with Daniel. But I knew Lisa was right, I couldn't avoid it forever. "I guess I should," I admitted, my voice small. I'm not sure I'm ready to face him yet." Lisa nodded understandingly. "What if you didn't have to? I could go with you, and we could pick a time when we know Daniel will be at work." The idea was both appealing and terrifying. "Do you think that would be okay? Legally, I mean? It's still your house too, Elena," Lisa reminded me gently. "You have every right to get your belongings." After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. "Okay. Let's do it." We chose a day later that week when I knew Daniel would be in court all day. As we pulled up to the house I'd once called home, I felt a strange mix of emotions, nostalgia, sadness, and a surprising hint of anger. "You okay?" Lisa asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath. "Yeah. Let's do this." As I unlocked the front door, I was struck by how quiet the house was. It felt hollow, as if all the life had been sucked out of it the moment I'd left. We moved through the rooms, filling boxes with my clothes, books, and personal items. Each object seemed to hold a memory, some sweet, some painful. In the kitchen, I paused, my hand hovering over the set of expensive copper pots Daniel's mother had given us as a wedding gift. They'd always felt more like a test than a present, a way for her to judge whether I was good enough to use such fine things. "Leave them," Lisa said, reading my hesitation. "You don't need any reminders of her in your new life." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders as I turned away from the pots. As we worked, I couldn't help but notice little changes around the house. Daniel's coffee mug, usually left unwashed in the sink, was nowhere to be seen. The throw pillows on the couch, which I'd always arranged just so, were haphazardly tossed about. It was as if the house itself was off-kilter without me there to maintain it. In the bedroom, I faltered. The sight of our shared bed, where we'd spent countless nights talking, laughing, and eventually growing apart, hit me harder than I'd expected. Lisa, sensing my distress, gently guided me to sit on the edge of the bed. "Take your time," she said softly. "We're in no rush." As I sat there, my eyes fell on Daniel's nightstand. Among the usual clutter, his watch, a half-empty glass of water, a dog-eared novel, was something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a small, velvet box, the kind that typically holds jewelry. Without thinking, I reached for it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a small heart pendant dangling from the chain. Attached was a note in Daniel's handwriting, "For my darling Elena." I'm sorry. Please come home. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Part of me, a smaller part than I'd expected, wanted to put on the necklace and pretend the last few weeks hadn't happened. But a stronger part knew that a pretty trinket couldn't erase years of feeling second best. What is it? Lisa asked, noticing my silence. I showed her the necklace and the note. Her eyes narrowed as she read it. Oh, honey, she said, her voice a mix of sympathy and frustration. You know this doesn't change anything, right? I nodded, closing the box and placing it back on the nightstand. I know. It's just. I guess I thought leaving would hurt him more. Lisa wrapped an arm around my shoulders. It probably did hurt him, Elena. But that doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. You deserve more than last-minute apologies and guilt gifts. Her words strengthened my resolve. I stood up, squaring my shoulders. You're right. Let's finish up here. As we carried the last of the boxes out to Lisa's car, I took one final look around the house. It was strange how a place that had once felt so full of love and promise now seemed cold and empty. I realized with a start that it wasn't the house that had changed, it was me. Ready to go? Lisa asked, keys in hand. I nodded, turning my back on the house and the life it represented. Ready. As we drove away, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief wash over me. It was really over. The life I'd built with Daniel, the dreams we'd shared, the future we'd planned, all of it was now firmly in the past. You know, Lisa said as we turned onto the main road, I'm really proud of you, Elena. It takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest at her words. Thanks, Lisa. I couldn't have done it without you. Oh, please, she scoffed, but I could see the pleased smile on her face. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You always have been. As we drove back to Lisa's house, my temporary home, I found myself thinking about the future. The business seminar had reignited my passion for baking, and I'd been spending my evenings researching small business loans and rental spaces for a potential bakery. Hey, Lisa, I said, an idea forming in my mind. Do you think you could help me with something this weekend? Of course, she replied. What do you need? I want to start testing some recipes, I said, feeling a flutter of excitement in my stomach. If I'm really going to do this bakery thing, I need to perfect my menu. Lisa's face lit up. Are you kidding? I would love to be your official taste tester. We can invite some friends over, make a whole day of it. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself grinning. That sounds perfect. As we pulled into Lisa's driveway, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Yes, there was still a long road ahead. Yes, there would be challenges and setbacks. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future, on my own terms. Later that night, as I unpacked my boxes in Lisa's spare room, which was starting to feel more and more like my own space, I came across an old photo album. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, bracing myself for the wave of nostalgia I knew would come. The first photo was from my wedding day. Daniel and I, young and smiling, our whole lives ahead of us. I traced the outline of my younger self, marveling at how different I felt now. That Elena had been so sure of her path, so certain of her happily ever after. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed something. In almost every photo, I was slightly off-center, as if I was trying to make myself smaller, less noticeable. Even in our wedding photo, I realized I was angled towards Daniel, while he stood straight, facing the camera. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes. How long had I been diminishing myself, trying to fit into the mold of what I thought Daniel and his family wanted me to be? I closed the album, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. That Elena was gone, and in her place was a woman who was ready to stand tall, to take up space, to pursue her own dreams. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, stronger, more determined. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a surge of pride. You've got this, Elena, I whispered to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I didn't dream of Daniel or our old life together. Instead, I dreamed of a small, sunlit bakery, the air filled with the sweet scent of fresh pastries and the sound of laughter. In the dream, I stood behind the counter, flour on my cheeks and a smile on my face, finally, truly happy. It was just a dream, but as I woke the next morning, I carried its warmth with me. The road ahead might be uncertain, but I was ready to face it. One day at a time, one step at a time, I would build the life I'd always wanted but had been afraid to reach for. And that life, I realized, was sweeter than any pastry I could ever bake. The weeks following my visit to the house flew by in a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Lisa had helped me organize a tasting party for my potential bakery menu. Our small gathering of friends had turned into an impromptu focus group, offering feedback and suggestions that left me both exhausted and exhilarated. As I stood in Lisa's kitchen, surrounded by the aftermath of our baking extravaganza, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't experienced in years. Plates of half-eaten pastries littered every surface, and the air was thick with the lingering scent of sugar and spice. "Well," Lisa said, leaning against the counter with a satisfied grin, "I think we can safely say that was a success." I nodded, unable to keep the smile off my face. I can't believe how supportive everyone was. "Did you see Sarah's face when she tried the lavender macarons?" Lisa laughed. "I thought she was going to propose marriage to that cookie." As we cleaned up, chatting and laughing, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the heat from the oven. This, I realized, was what I'd been missing all those years with Daniel, the freedom to pursue my passions, surrounded by people who genuinely supported me. It was late by the time we finished cleaning. As I helped Lisa load the last of the dishes into the dishwasher, my phone buzzed with a text. I froze when I saw the name on the screen. "Daniel." "What is it?" Lisa asked, noticing my sudden stillness. I showed her the phone. "It's Daniel. He wants to meet." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "Are you going to?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to continue moving forward without looking back. But another part knew that I needed closure if I was ever going to truly move on. "I think I have to," I said finally. "If only to make it clear that it's really over." Lisa nodded, though I could see the concern in her eyes. "Just be careful, okay? And call me if you need anything." The next day, I found myself sitting in a small cafe downtown, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee to stop them from shaking. When Daniel walked in, I was struck by how different he looked. His usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Elena," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. Up close, I could see the strain on his face, the lines of worry that hadn't been there before. "I got your note," he said after a moment of awkward silence. "And I saw that you came by the house." "Yes," I replied, finding my voice. "I needed to get my things." He nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. "Elena, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Can we talk about this? Maybe we can work things out." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Daniel, I don't think there's anything to work out. You made your choice, remember?" He flinched at my words, the same words I'd left in my note. "I know, and I was wrong. I should have prioritized you, our marriage. I see that now." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old longing. It would be so easy to fall back into our familiar patterns, to let things go back to the way they were. But then I thought of the woman I'd been becoming these past few weeks, strong, independent, pursuing her own dreams. "It's not just about the ring, Daniel," I said softly. "It's about years of feeling like I came second to your job, to your mother, to everything. I can't go back to that." "But I can change," he insisted, reaching across the table to take my hand. I pulled back, and the hurt in his eyes was palpable. "Elena, please. I love you." I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them away. "I know you do, Daniel. In your way. But love shouldn't make you feel small. It shouldn't require you to constantly compromise who you are." He sat back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "So that's it. 10 years of marriage, and you're just walking away?" I shook my head. "I'm not just walking away, Daniel. I'm choosing myself. Maybe for the first time in my life." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of our shared history and the finality of this moment hanging between us. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What about the bakery? Your dream?" I was surprised he remembered. "I'm pursuing it," I said. "I've been working on recipes, looking into loans and locations." A sad smile crossed his face. "You always were an amazing baker. I'm sorry I didn't support that dream more." His words, though kind, only reinforced my decision. "Thank you," I said. "But it's not your support I need anymore, Daniel. I'm doing this for me." As we said our goodbyes, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. This chapter of my life was truly closing, but another one, full of possibility and promise, was just beginning. Walking back to Lisa's house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The conversation with Daniel, though difficult, had given me the closure I needed. I was ready to move forward, to fully embrace this new life I was building. When I walked through Lisa's front door, she was waiting for me, concern etched on her face. "How did it go?" she asked. I smiled, surprising both of us. "It went well, actually. I think it's really over now." Lisa pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you, Elena. You're one of the strongest people I know." As we sat on her couch, sharing a pint of ice cream and dissecting every moment of my conversation with Daniel, I felt a surge of gratitude for this friendship. Lisa had been my rock through all of this, offering support without judgment, pushing me to be better without trying to change who I was. "You know," I said, digging my spoon into the ice cream, "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I started looking for my own place." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you know you're welcome to stay here as long as you need." I nodded. "I know, and I'm so grateful for that. But I think I'm ready to stand on my own 2 feet. Really start this new chapter, you know?" Lisa's face broke into a wide grin. "Elena Martinez, look at you go. From hesitant baker to independent woman ready to take on the world." I laughed, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. "I don't know about taking on the world. But my own apartment and a small bakery, that I think I can handle." The next few days were a flurry of activity. Between researching apartments and finalizing my business plan, I barely had a moment to breathe. But every night, as I lay in bed in Lisa's spare room, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. It was on a sunny Saturday morning that I found it, a small storefront for rent in the heart of downtown. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Maria, showed me around the space, pointing out its potential. "It needs a bit of work," she admitted, gesturing to the peeling paint and outdated fixtures. "But the bones are good. And just look at that natural light." I stood in the middle of the empty space, closing my eyes and letting my imagination run wild. I could almost smell the aroma of fresh bread, hear the chime of the bell as customers walked in. "I'll take it," I heard myself say. Maria's eyebrows shot up. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe discuss it with your husband?" I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. No husband to discuss it with. This decision is all mine. As I signed the lease papers, I felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a healthy dose of fear. This was it, I was really doing this. That night, as Lisa and I celebrated with a bottle of wine, I couldn't stop grinning. "I can't believe it's really happening," I said, my voice filled with wonder. Lisa clinked her glass against mine. "Believe it, honey. You're making it happen." As the night wore on and the wine flowed freely, we found ourselves reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. "You know," Lisa said, a mischievous glint in her eye, "we should leave a message for Daniel. Something to really drive home that you've moved on." I laughed, the wine making me feel bold. "What did you have in mind?" We spent the next hour crafting the perfect message, giggling like schoolgirls. In the morning, I knew I'd probably think better of it, but for now, it felt cathartic. The next day, nursing a slight hangover but feeling no less determined, I drove to my old house one last time. Daniel was out of town for work, so I knew the coast was clear. With shaking hands, I slipped an envelope under the door. Inside was a simple note: "Daniel, you made your choice. Now I've made mine. Enjoy your mother's ring. It's the only thing left of your choices. Elena P.S. If you're ever in town, Stop by Elena's Sweet Dreams Bakery. Grand opening next month. Don't forget to tip your server. As I walked away from the house for the last time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The message left behind wasn't just for Daniel, it was for me too. A reminder of how far I'd come, and how far I still had to go. Driving back to Lisa's house, soon to be my ex-house, as I prepared to move into my own apartment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, full of challenges I couldn't even imagine yet. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited to face those challenges. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all. The months leading up to the grand opening of Elena's Sweet Dreams Bakery were a whirlwind of activity. Every day brought new challenges, from negotiating with suppliers to finalizing the menu, but I tackled each one with a determination I hadn't known I possessed. Lisa, true to form, was by my side every step of the way. She helped me paint the walls a warm, inviting yellow, hung curtains she'd sewn herself, and even convinced her brother, a graphic designer, to create a beautiful logo for the bakery. "You know," she said one evening as we sat on the floor of the nearly finished bakery, surrounded by paint cans and drop cloths, "I always knew you had this in you." I looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "This fire, this passion. I saw it when we were kids, before." She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. Before Daniel. Before I'd started compromising my dreams for someone else's expectations. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," I said softly, "for never giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself." The night before the grand opening, I could barely sleep. I tossed and turned in my new apartment, my mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if no one showed up? What if they hated my baking? What if this had all been a huge mistake? As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I gave up on sleep and headed to the bakery. The streets were quiet, the town still sleeping, as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon lingered in the air from yesterday's test bakes. I ran my hand along the smooth countertop, still marveling that this was mine. All mine. I got to work, losing myself in the familiar rhythms of measuring, mixing, and kneading. As the first batch of croissants came out of the oven, golden and perfectly flaky, I felt my nerves settle. This was what I was meant to do. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 7 a.m. I looked up, my heart pounding, to see Lisa standing there with a huge grin on her face. "Well," she said, spreading her arms wide, "aren't you going to serve your first official customer?" Laughing, I handed her a still warm croissant. She took a bite and closed her eyes in bliss. "Oh, Elena," she said, her voice muffled by pastry, "this is amazing." And just like that, Elena's Sweet Dreams Bakery was open for business. The day passed in a blur of smiling faces, words of congratulation, and the constant hum of the ovens. By closing time, I was exhausted but exhilarated. We'd sold out of almost everything, and the tip jar was overflowing with not just money but little notes of encouragement from the townspeople. As I was wiping down the counters, the bell chimed again. I looked up, ready to apologize and say we were closed, but the words died in my throat. Daniel was standing in the doorway, looking uncertain and a little lost. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're actually closed, but..." He nodded quickly. "I know, I'm sorry. I saw the lights on and thought." He trailed off, looking around the bakery with a mix of admiration and regret. "This place is amazing, Elena. You did all this." I nodded, a surge of pride cutting through my surprise at seeing him. "I did." He took a step forward, then seemed to think better of it. "I got your note," he said. "The one you left at the house." I felt a blush creep up my cheeks, remembering the slightly wine-fueled message Lisa and I had crafted. "Oh, that." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. It was quite something. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "I'm proud of you, Elena. I know that probably doesn't mean much coming from me, but I am. You've always been capable of incredible things. I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. His words, so similar to what Lisa had said months ago, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them away, determined not to let him see how much his approval still affected me. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. He nodded, shoving his hands in his pockets. Well, I should go. Let you finish closing up. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Elena? Your mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, she wants you to know she's sorry. For everything. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. She said that? Daniel chuckled softly. Well, not in so many words. But she did say your lemon tarts were adequate, which is high praise coming from her. Despite myself, I laughed. I'll take it. As Daniel left, the bell chiming softly behind him, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't even realized I'd been missing. The next few months flew by in a whirlwind of early mornings, late nights, and more baking than I'd ever done in my life. The bakery was a success beyond my wildest dreams. Word spread quickly in our small town, and soon we had regulars who came in every day for their morning coffee and pastry. One particularly busy Saturday morning, as I was elbow-deep in bread dough, Lisa burst into the kitchen, her eyes wide with excitement. Elena, you've got to come see this. Wiping my hands on my apron, I followed her out to the front of the bakery. There, plastered on the window, was a review from the local newspaper. My heart skipped a beat as I read the headline, "Sweet Dreams Come True at Elena's Bakery." The article praised not just my baking, but the warm, inviting atmosphere of the bakery. Elena Martinez has created more than just a place to get your morning coffee, it read. She's created a home away from home for our community. I felt tears prick at my eyes as I turned to Lisa. Can you believe it? I whispered. She pulled me into a flour-dusted hug. I can, she said fiercely. You've worked so hard for this, Elena. You deserve every bit of success. As the months turned into a year, then two, the bakery became more than just a business. It became a part of the community. I hosted baking classes for kids, started a weekly book club that met over coffee and scones, and even catered my first wedding. Through it all, I found myself growing in ways I never expected. I became more confident, more outspoken. I made decisions without second-guessing myself. I learned to trust my instincts, both in baking and in life. One quiet afternoon, as I was experimenting with a new recipe in the kitchen, I heard the bell chime. Wiping my hands on my apron, I went out to greet the customer. To my surprise, it was Daniel's mother. She stood awkwardly by the counter, looking around the bakery with an unreadable expression. "Hello, Elena," she said stiffly. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson," I replied, my guard immediately up. "What can I get for you?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm not here to buy anything. I wanted to see it for myself." "The bakery." I nodded, unsure of what to say. We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again. "You've done well for yourself," she said, her tone grudging but sincere. "I have to admit, I didn't think you had it in you. A year ago, those words would have crushed me. Now, I felt only a mild irritation." "Thank you," I said coolly. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" She shook her head, turning to leave. But at the door, she paused. "For what it's worth," she said, not looking at me, "I'm sorry. For a lot of things." Before I could respond, she was gone, the bell chiming in her wake. I stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Then, slowly, I felt a smile spread across my face. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. That evening, as I locked up the bakery and walked home under a sky full of stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road that had led me here had been long and often painful, but I wouldn't change a single step. I thought about the woman I'd been when I first left Daniel, scared, unsure, clinging to the safety of the familiar even when it no longer served me. And I thought about the woman I was now, strong, independent, living a life that was truly my own. As I reached my apartment, I paused to look back at the bakery. The sign, illuminated by a soft streetlight, read Elena's Sweet Dreams. But it was more than just a bakery. It was a symbol of everything I'd overcome, everything I'd achieved. I smiled to myself as I unlocked my door. Sweet dreams indeed. But the best part? I was wide awake, living those dreams every single day. The silence Daniel had once demanded was now filled with the laughter of friends, the chime of the bakery bell, and the sweet sound of my own voice, finally speaking up for what I wanted. And that sound? It was sweeter than any pastry I could ever bake.